Hey, guys. Welcome to Silva Podcast. I'm Fred Silva. And today I have a special guest from the US. He's an English teacher. And today's conversation is, I know you will like it. It's going to be amazing. And uh, during this conversation, we will bring to different topics to help you to improve your English, to gain more confidence and speak English with more confidence and without hesitation. So, teacher Joseph is from the US, but his family is from Mexico. So he grew up learning two languages at the same time. And during the conversation, we will bring information and tips about languages, not just about English, but things that can help you to improve your English too. So before we start the conversation, I just want to talk about our sponsor for today. This episode is sponsored by Speak English with Tiffany Academy, and today I want to talk about the program Speak English Like a Native from teacher Tiffany's Academy. Why I am bringing this program to the podcast? You know, I would interview an English teacher, a native English teacher. So to talk to a native is not easy, not at all, especially when you don't have the resources to apply in the conversation. So in this course, in this program, you will find the results you need to improve your English and speak English like a native without any fear, without hesitation, without without any trouble, because speaking English needs to be fun, needs to be a good thing. So in this program, you will have access to a lot of different English conversation about different topics that people speak in a daily basis in America, and you can see how an American think, how they use the words, how they structure their speech before even open their mouths and start to talk. So in this program, you will have every single month, you have a new English conversation with natives, and you can get, everything that you need about that topic and structure and use it in a good way. So I am part of this family too. I'm part of this program, and for me, it was a game changer when I just started in this program, because it gave me more confidence, it gave me more structures and things that I didn't see before, because I never saw a course like this before I jumpstart in the program. So if you want to speak English for real, like a native, not like a student, if you want to rock in your English, you need to improve using this program. So hit the link below, or you can see the QR code on screen, and start now. And Teacher Tiffany, thanks for sponsoring this video. I'm so happy to be part of this program and to be part of this platform, because I know how important is this program for students, and people love it. So thanks again. I hope we can help more people to improve their English using this program, because it's amazing. So let's jumpstart the conversation. I want to introduce to you Teacher Joseph, and I hope you can get a lot of things from this conversation, because it will help you to improve your English too. So, Teacher Joseph, how are you doing? Welcome to Silva Podcast.
I'm doing great. Just living the American dream in Mexico, I guess.
Good. Well, I know you for a long time. I think we start to meet each other on Cambly a few years ago. And I know that you was born in America, in the US, and you live in Mexico right now. Can you talk a little bit about your where you live, where you're from, and what you do right now in the English environment?
Okay, so you were correct. I was born in the United States to a very young couple in love, in high school in love. And shortly after I was born, they were married. And because they were so young, my grandfather wanted my father to, at least get a career. So he helped my mother and father in a town called Guadalajara, Mexico. And my father attended a private college, a university there called Autónoma de Guadalajara, where he became an engineer. So before I could learn how to speak, I was living in Guadalajara, and my parents would speak English to me, and my family there in Guadalajara would speak Spanish to me. So I grew up bilingual, speaking English and Spanish, my whole life, pretty much. Um, about 14 years ago, I decided to move to Mexico with a cousin to open a restaurant, a type of, um, southwestern food, Tex-Mex kind of like border food, Mexican food with influence from United States cuisine. It didn't work out, so I thought I'd give teaching English as a second language a shot, and I fell in love with it. I've been teaching English here in Mexico and also online to students of all ages from all over Latin America and all over the world.
So you said that you grew up bilingual, speaking Spanish and English. How was that? Because for me, I speak Portuguese as my mother language. I I speak Spanish as well as my second language, and I speak English as a third language. But for me, it's a little bit weird, the concept to have two languages in your head at the same time when you're a child. How was that with you? How was grow up with two languages in the head?
Um, well, I guess I didn't really think about it. It's just something natural. I could go, visit family in Mexico and spend time with my father, and after my parents separated, um, spend time with my father and his side of the family in Mexico, and it's like a light switch. You can switch on the English and switch it off, and switch on the Spanish and switch it on. It's just it just becomes something that's natural that you can do. Um, and I never really gave it much thought. But until I started trying to learn other languages like Italian and French and German, Irish, Turkish, um, even I want to try to learn Arabic, but I hear it's a very difficult language to learn. I tried learning Japanese, Korean,
Wow.
not Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. Because in China, there's, just like other parts of the world, there are different dialects or different, similar words, but, they can be distinct languages. So for me, when I try to learn new languages, it's just something that my brain is already, um, I guess, wired for. So, as an example, I watched this really great film the other day about an African American girl from Texas, and you know, she quits law school to go to an art school in Florence, Italy, and falls in love with a Sicilian chef down there. And in the movie, I always watch movies with subtitles, even in English or Spanish. It doesn't matter the language. Um,
Why do you
when
why do you
well,
do
because
that?
it's a visual and audio experience. Um, And also, like, as I guess, as a person who translates, you know, things from English to Spanish, Spanish to English, sometimes I find it entertaining that what I'm reading is not what the actors are actually saying, even if it's in the same language, because a lot of times actors will improvise certain lines. So it will have the same meaning, but different words are in the subtitle. Another reason is if I want to learn another language, I also have to be able to connect how that word sounds in that language with how it's written.
Oh, I know what you mean. I sometimes I do that with English too, because I want to hear the word and see how it looks like. Because depend of the language you are learning or trying to learn, sometimes the word is written in a way, but the sound is totally different. So it's good when you can connect the sound and the word, and then you can understand better how that word looks like. So I try this sometimes. But I'm curious about something. You said that you speak Spanish, English, uh, and other languages. How many languages do you speak?
Fluently only at English and Spanish, but I came across an application years ago that I started implementing in youth with my students that were in sixth grade. The application is Duolingo, and it was my first experience teaching children in a traditional classroom. So I spent a lot of time doing research and finding things to improve my classes that will also help improve the language level of some of my students. Because even though I had sixth graders and I had two different groups, each group had its own level. But within those groups, you have students who are at the bottom end of that level. So you have to be able to find resources that can get these other students to catch up at least to the middle of the range of levels. So when I came across this application, I started using it, and also given my, I guess, ancestry, I have a very diverse ancestry: European, Mesoamerican, South American, African. So I have like Middle Eastern. So I have, just a blend of different cultures. And that learning that from a DNA test was my motivation to learn more about the areas where my ancestry comes from. And in order to do that, I think in a way that is respectful is to learn the language and also learn how to cook or maybe go to a restaurant that's of that cuisine. Because I think one of the most important things I think that can bridge cultures together is food. Second would be
Yeah.
language and communication. Because if you consider, you know, the cuisines that we have today, the dishes that we have today in different parts of the world, all of that has evolved because of trade. I mean, unfortunately, some trade has happened through, conquest, through wars, through, um, for example, in England, what a noble person or a king or queen might do to unite two different factions that are in conflict, they'll marry their children to one another. So then you have there kind of a royal, interracial or intercultural unification through marriage, through food. And I think, food is probably one of the most exciting ways to learn about another culture because you get to experience flavors and memories and smells. Out of the five senses, sight, smell, taste, sound. I mean, you create these fun memories when you try food of another culture, and it kind of gives you like an insight into how that culture also is.
Yeah, I like what you said. That food is a good way to connect with other cultures. And of course, if you want to learn a new language, for example, English, and you are able to connect with the culture of the country you are trying to learn the language from, for example, the United States, it's so much better uh, when you know more about the culture. And food is one of the best ways to do that because you will eat the same thing that a native English speaker eat every single day. For example, you can feel, you can smell, you can touch and live the same thing that they are living at in their own country. So as you mentioned, culture. I like this point because culture is like, in my opinion, is almost impossible. You learn a new language, for example, English or Spanish, whatever, if you don't know a little about the culture of that country. Because the language is just one aspect of the country. Culture makes you feel more. I'm part of that country. I can go there. I can talk to people because I know what they do. I know what who they are. So this is one of the things that I get with me since I start to learn languages because I noticed that it was important. For example, if you are learning Spanish in Latin America, you will see the way people are here. Yeah, we are friendly. We are very close. We like to celebrate. People are happy. So your your personality in that language needs to be a little bit like them. For example, in Spanish, my personality is like very happy, very very how can I say, very I don't know, very exciting. But if I'm speaking another language like English, I'm a little bit more serious because the language and the culture of the country is a little bit more serious. So culture is a really important fact and that everyone needs to be aware if you want to speak English like a native or fluently, because you will be more in the language. You will be more involved with the language. So I think this is really important. And you grow up with two different cultures in your life, right? Because Mexican people have different style of people from the US. Like they are similar in some aspects, but they are very different in other ones. So uh, for you, it was like very easy to handle with everything like this, or when you are in the US, you are like different than when you are in Mexico. Speaking about the language and the culture.
Okay, so one thing to understand about the United States and the culture is that it's heavily influenced by Britain and by the Christian Orthodox Church. Mexico is heavily influenced by Spain and Portugal, having a heavy Catholic influence. So just in religion alone, you have those different cultural differences. I mean, just look at Ireland, for example. For many years, Ireland was divided between Protestants and Catholics, and they killed each other over their beliefs. Um, and it's just fascinating, because both cultures or both religions are Abrahamic religions, founded in, from the God of Abraham. So, like, to me, that's always been kind of bizarre. But as far as language goes, I've been told that I sound a lot different when I speak English compared to when I speak Spanish. So even my tone of voice changes. So, like, I guess one difference or one of the benefits of growing up bilingual is that you have the ability to sound native or fluent in both languages. So that when you speak, um, it's very hard to detect. Oh, you're from the United States, or you speak English like someone from Latin America, because you carry a certain accent or pronunciation of certain letters and vowels. Um, when you're learning a new language, but when you learn a language simultaneously, you pick up on the pronunciation of both. So when you flip the switch from one language to another, most people can't tell the difference.
This was the reason I asked you at the beginning, how is to grow up with two languages in the head? Because I thought, like you said, I thought you speaking in English fluently as a person that was born in the US, and you speak Spanish as a person that was born in Mexico. And because, for example, in my case, I am not a native English speaker. I have an accent, but you don't, because you since you are a child, you grow up with both in your head in a natural environment, and you speak English every single day with your parents, and Spanish as well, because you are in a family that speaks Spanish too. So it kind of interesting, because some people get like, oh, I can't speak another language because I grow up with my language, for example, Arabic. That's so different. I have a strong accent. But when you switch your mind and start to think, I need to be more involved with the country I am learning the language. So I need to see the culture. I need to see how they speak, uh, how is the way that they treat other people, how know more about the culture in the country. I think could help them to be more like, okay, I'm not a native English speaker, but I can speak the language very well, because I will like switch my tone of voice or my personality in that language. One thing that I like to do, especially when I start to study Spanish, was I I mimic the natives. Like I had a lot of friends from Mexico, and when I was talking to them, I tried to talk the same way, using the same slangs. For example, the first time I have heard the expression "que padre," I got like, oh, this is really good, because this is one thing that it's just speak in Mexico. Just people from Mexico do that. So I start to mimic that expression in other ones and other ones, and then my Spanish start to sound more natural. Uh,
Right.
I received a few questions a few years ago. Where you were born? I said in Brazil. No, I thought you are from Mexico, but I'm not, because I try to mimic them. So I think this is a really important tip if you are learning English, for example. You need to be more involved with the culture of the country and try to do the things as a native do, like the tone of voice, like the vocabulary words, and the way they pronounce the word. I think it's very important to catch these little details, because this make a lot of sense when you are talking in that language.
Yeah, one thing that I forgot to mention is like my brother and sisters on my mother's side. Um, they grew up in a predominantly, heavy Hispanic, neighborhood. And in those neighborhoods where they're heavily, um, Latin American, it doesn't matter, from Guatemala, from Colombia, from Panama, from Mexico, where these Latin communities are, um, even if you're born in the U.S., you're still surrounded by a certain pronunciation. So like my brother and sisters, they speak with an accent. I don't. And the reason for that is because I went to private school, Catholic private schools that my grandfather paid for. So I was exposed more to, I guess, white Americans, because it's pretty expensive to go to a private school, and you know, most Latin American families, you know, are migrants and they're working in, you know, working class jobs like mechanics or gardening or, you know, agriculture, restaurants. So they really can't afford to send their kids to really good schools. So the reason why I don't speak English with an accent is because I was, you know, my environment was accent free. And the same when I learned speaking Spanish. I was speaking Spanish, learning to speak Spanish how Mexican people spoke, and learning how to speak English how most white Americans speak. And it's the same for my father, because he also went to like some of the same Catholic schools. And my brothers who were born, my father's children after me, have two twin brothers that were born in Guadalajara. They didn't know any English before they moved to the United States. And it's the same for them. They speak English without an accent, and they speak Spanish without an accent. Um, and what I remember, I lived with my father and my stepmother and my three brothers for some time. And in the house, we always spoke Spanish, no English. So, I mean, it goes to show how malleable children's brains are, because a child who moves from one country to another doesn't know any of the language and pick up on that language very easily.
So the environment seems to be a very important aspect of when you are learning language, because you mentioned that you are in the US and at school in a private school surround people that just speak English, not Spanish. I I see a lot of people living in America, living in the US for a long time, even 10, 20 years. And after a long time, they can't speak English very well. Why? Because sometimes they, for example, a Brazilian person go to the US to live there, and they stay in a Brazilian community, or they stay in a Mexican community, or in a Puerto Rican community. So they are surrounded to Spanish, not English. Then they are not free to try something different, to hear the language from people that doesn't have accent, like Spanish accent or something. So I see this a lot of times with people that immigrate to the US, because they get stuck because they just don't leave the environment they are, because it's safe, right? It's safe for me to be surrounded to Portuguese, because I don't need to be I don't need to put effort to, and I don't need to be out of my comfort zone, because I speak that language. So sometimes people get like in this trap, and they get stuck and they don't speak English very well, because they are not in an environment that can help to really improve. And I think this is one important aspect as well. The environment you live uh, shape the English you will talk, you will speak.
Right, right. You're absolutely right. Environment is a factor. There's many other factors. Exposure for one. What I've noticed when I moved to Mexico City with my cousin, he had already been living in Guadalajara for about a year, and he invited me to come live with him. So when we got down there, the purpose of him moving to Mexico was for him to learn Spanish and try to, improve his Spanish speaking skills. In the in almost 3 years that he lived there, didn't improve any any of his language skills. Why? Because he would surround himself with people in Mexico that spoke English.
Mm.
So it's kind of the same situation with immigrants moving to the United States. Um, because when you move someplace new, you're going to experience a culture shock. You're going to experience a language shock, language barriers. So out of to stay within our comfort zone and not to experience so much fear or humility you know, or making mistakes. Plus, there's also, the nowadays, since 2016, the United States has experienced a rise of, racial crimes. So I think why some people never learn how to speak English when they move to the United States is fear, lack of confidence. They don't want to, be made a fool of, or they don't want to look like a fool. So, they hinder themselves from any progress that they could actually make. And time is also another factor. A lot of immigrants that move there, that don't speak the language, are in certain types of jobs where they don't have to speak English, and they're surrounded by people that speak their own language. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. Migrant workers get taken advantage of no matter what country you're in, and so they're working long hours. Working maybe more than 40 hours a week, maybe 60, 70 hours a week. So when they get home, they don't want to study. They just want to eat and get some rest before the next day of work. So I think those are some of the factors why some people have difficulty learning another language when they move to a different country.
Yeah, this is a great point. This is a great point. When you are an adult trying to learn another language, especially when you are living in a foreign country, could be very tricky. You need to work and you need to study because you know that as much you speak the language, you can make more money. If you are in a job that you don't need to speak English, okay, it's good, but you will not get a lot of money. But if you are in a job that you can speak English, you are able to do that. Of course, you have more opportunities. So I think this is the reality, unfortunately, but it's good to show that English is really important. Even if you are not living in another country, but nowadays you can use English for work for any company around the world because after the pandemic, work at home is so normal for everyone. So it's possible to have new opportunities, even if you are living in your own country. But if you speak English, you will have so much more opportunities. And speaking about that, I just mentioned in the beginning, but I didn't give a lot of details. You work as a tutor on Cambly. Cambly, for those that don't know what it is a platform where you can have conversation with native English speakers, native English teachers, and it helps you to improve your conversation skills. Sometimes if you want to improve your grammar or your vocabulary or your conversation skills, it'll help you to do that. And Joseph is a tutor on Cambly. I use Cambly for a long time. So I think that is 3 years now. So, and tell me a little bit about your experience speaking with people from all over the world. I know that you speak with Brazilians, with Arabic people, with people from Europe, from all over the world, and I want to know from you how this works and what are the challenges you see with students from all over the world, trying to speak your language, and in that environment that you have, every single day you have experience every single day with people from all over the world. I want to know from you a little bit about this experience, how this looks like, how it is, and what are the challenges you see from these students.
Okay, Fred. Well, I first started online teaching after probably about maybe 6 years ago, maybe more. And I started teaching for a company that is, I guess, part of the Mexican government, and they work with like the universities and colleges. So I started first with university students, or I guess professionals that were, you know, returning to university to get, I guess, a certificate in English so that they can get higher pay. Um, the challenges, I think, with online teaching depends on whether you're teaching one-on-one or in a group. So I first started teaching online on using Zoom, the Zoom platform. And I would have groups of maybe between 15 to 30 people in Mexico. After that, I had the opportunity to teach with Open English Junior. So I would teach with children or teach children from probably as young as maybe 5 years old to as old as maybe 15 or 16, even though the margins for the platform, the minimum age was 8 and the oldest was 14. Some clients would, or parents would, still be able to get away with certain things, even if it's not advisable. Because for children under the age of 8, the online experience can be really stressful for them. So, I think that was one of the challenges I had working with children, is trying to be able, with the limited time that we only had like 20 minutes of class time, maybe if it was a group, maybe 5 minutes. If you missed the first 5 minutes for introductions, then the material for the lesson, and then the wrap up, giving, feedback. So the challenges with children are under a certain age is that, they really can't they don't know how to use the keyboard that well, or maybe they don't know how to draw, certain activities that, I would have them, do interactively. So some of them would start crying because they're like, oh, I don't know how to do this, and it's like, uh, you know, there's really little you can do, I mean, especially you can't, you can't tutor a child the same way you can tutor them in person than online. In person you can be like, okay, so do this, and you can show them physically. So that's, I guess, the same challenge, presents itself with adults too, compared to teaching in a traditional way than online is the
I will ask
resources
you.
you have.
I will ask you about which of them is more challenging. But I remember during the pandemic, when pandemic starts, and my son start to have online classes. It's really extremely hard to hold them, for 30 minutes in front of the computer watching the class. For an adult, could be stressful, but it's possible. But for a child, it's really hard to hold them in a place quiet, watching for a long time. So I think this is a great challenge for you at that time. And I will ask you, but I already know the answer, right? So, but I know that adults have their own challenges in learning English. And what is the main one you see? You are in touch with people every single day, people from other countries. Uh, what is the challenge that you see that is like common in a lot of students from different countries?
Well, in my experience at Cambly, I think one of the challenges um, is depends on the level of English and how they can communicate. Like I've spent maybe almost a year with some people, and they still depend on the translator. They'll write what they want to say in English and use the translator, and then read what they say um, to me, what the translator says, and I can tell, I can pick up. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound quite right, and it's not what we've been practicing. So it's like I think that one of the challenges for students is don't depend on the translator too much. Use it to improve your skills, but not depend on it to just translate what you want to say in your language and then just read verbatim what it says in the translator.
Yeah, this is
When
tricky. This,
Now, when you can identify when a student is using the translator and then not reading verbatim and changing what it says in the translator, you're like, okay, now they're picking up on how it should be said in English and not be translated verbatim.
yeah, this is an important fact. When you try to translate from English to your own language, and then you try to translate again and respond to English. First of all, it's a lot of time to this process take a lot of time in your head, and sometimes you get like hesitating. You will answer something, but you are thinking. So the answer takes so long to be sent, and this I think this get like the conversation doesn't happen in a good way. The other thing is I I see a lot of people thinking so much about to understand everything that the other person are saying. And this is insane because it's impossible. Even in your own language, sometimes in the conversation, you can't get everything, every word, but you know the context, you know what people say because of the context, and then you can understand. So when I change this in my mind, and okay, I don't need to translate anything. I don't need to understand everything. I can get from the context. Everything changed for me because I was like very worried about to understand everything. And then I noticed, no, I don't need to understand everything. Okay, if I understand 80%, 90%, it's good. The other words or the expression I can get from the context, and I don't need to be like repeat again, please, or something like that, because the conversation doesn't flow when you are like, oh, can you repeat that, please, or just asking for explanations, because sometimes you don't need to understand everything, but just the main point or the main idea.
Right, right, and that's important too. And the way that we do that is through reading exercises. Reading small articles and just answering a few comprehension questions. To see how much you understood of what you read. And the other the other part of that is not to just read quietly. You need to read out loud. Because again, if some people may learn better by just reading, or some people may learn better by just listening or by doing. But I've always felt that if you utilize two different skills, you're more likely to remember and understand than by just using one type of learning skill.
Good, good. And I I didn't tell to the audience yet, but right now you are working in Teacher Tiffany platform in Teacher Tiffany's Academy, and it's a little bit different from your job on Cambly, because there you are like speaking with students from all over the world, but in groups, and and then you help the students to to have contact with a native English speaker culture, vocabulary words, and conversations. So tell us a little bit about this new experience for you, because it's different. You talk with just one person and you are talking with more people, and then how do you handle this, how this experience is for you right now?
Well, on Speak English with Tiffany, I have several responsibilities. Um, the one that I got started on was as a comment moderator and editor. And what I do there is I read students' sentences from focused vocabulary that's in her lesson plan. And if I try to, well, what I do is I edit spelling. So if a word is spelled incorrectly, I change it. If the context doesn't make sense with the words that were used, I'll rewrite the sentence using the vocabulary, um, using the idea that the student has in mind. Sometimes the sentence is grammatically correct, but doesn't make any sense. And that's one of the biggest challenges in that part of the work that I do. If I can't make sense of what they're trying to communicate, I'll just write a sample sentence, to give the students an idea of how that word is used. The order of how words are placed in a sentence too. Um, you
And
know,
this, I think this happened especially because of the influence of your own language when you are speaking in English. For example, Latin America people, Brazilians, they have we have our own way to speak. The order to make a question or the order to speak the words. Sometimes we try to use the same pattern in English and doesn't make sense. I I was with you a few times on Cambly reviewing emails and texts in English, and sometimes okay, it's good, but the order is not correct, or you use a kind of a vocabulary word that doesn't make sense in English. It makes sense in Portuguese, it makes sense in Spanish, but in English it doesn't make sense. And this can be a little tricky sometimes, depending the language you speak as a mother language, because that language will influence English. In your opinion, how can we avoid that? Because it's not easy to do it. It's not easy to uh, to avoid this influence of your own language when you are speaking in English. How can we try to avoid that?
well, I mean, I'm not sure if it's good that we should avoid it, because the English language is always evolving. Um, there's the standard American English, there's African American English, Spanish American English, and within these communities, um, the way you speak with your native language grammar, people in your community are going to understand you. It's when you go outside of those communities that people will understand what you're trying to say, but it's going to sound different and funny to them. But you'll still be able to communicate. I mean, that's the whole objective, is to be able to communicate. Um, so I don't think it's necessary to get rid of them. But it is, I think it is important to recognize, your mistakes when you're speaking English in a different English speaking community.
Yeah, I'm more peaceful now because I do this type of mistakes a lot of time. So sometimes when I'm asking the question, I just forget that the word, the the order of the words is different in English. So sometimes when I'm asking, I make this type of mistakes. And when I see, for example, an American guy or woman speaking in English, for example, in a movie, sometimes they make the same mistake we make, like it ends normal. For example, sometimes they don't put the auxiliary verb as auxiliary verb before. They just ask the question without the auxiliary verb before. And I got like, oh, this is interesting because they are native and they do that often. So maybe it's not a big of deal if I make this the same mistake. So I don't need to worry so much about this. So I'm happy now because I know that I can make mistakes and then I can improve my English by learning from my mistakes.
No, that's good. Yeah. And I think what you mentioned there is an indirect question,
Yeah.
a question that it starts with the subject, but the auxiliary isn't necessary because, again, it depends on the intonation of the word. With a rising intonation, you can ask an indirect question without using the auxiliary, and it still sounds like a question. In writing, however, it's really not used. So in speaking, yeah, you can make those mistakes. But in writing, one of the most important things that I'll remember any of my writing teachers throughout school told me, never write how you speak. So,
Interesting.
and I just, because it's not just, um, people who migrated from Mexico or Latin America. You also have to understand there's Polish Americans, Irish Americans, Scottish Americans, um, people from German Americans, and these are not English speaking countries. Ireland and Scotland, they were forced to learn English by the Vikings and the Scandinavians. But originally they had Scottish and Irish or Celtic, which was a different language. So
I like what
you have
I
to
like what you
understand
said. I like what you said. Don't write in English as you talk, the same way you talk. I was thinking about that because sometimes you can sound unprofessional or maybe rude or something because you are trying to do the same thing that you are doing when you speak. In each language, the language you spoke is different than the language you are writing. For example, in Portuguese, it's acceptable if you make mistakes when you're talking, like the pronouns and everything you can use differently. But if you are writing and you use a pronoun wrong, people will see that you are not so smart or so intelligent because you make a mistake in your writing. So I think this happened in English too. So I like that tip because it's important to see, okay, you can talk in English in a casual way, in an informal way. But if you are writing, be professional, write correctly, use the grammar rules and everything. And speaking about grammar rules, what do you think about that? Some teachers say that is not important. Other teachers say it's important. And but for the students that are watching us right now, what do you think? Grammar is really important or is not so much?
Well, I think it depends on what your goals are. If you want to reach a university level of English, an advanced level of English, then yes, grammar is important because, when you get to that level of English, you're either in school or you're in a profession that requires you to be able to write emails or speak in conference calls or in meetings with a certain level of you know. Now, if you're starting out as a kid, you know, I mean, if you just want to be able to communicate with people, grammar is not that important. I mean, it becomes more important the more advanced your level of English gets. But, you know, just for communicating, not that important. Um, because if you can communicate and the other person understands what you're trying to say, then you've reached your goal.
Yeah, this happened to me when I just started to learn English. I was not worried about grammar. I just didn't study grammar ever. I was just trying to speak. So I start like that. But with the time, I start to work using English in a daily basis. So I need grammar now. So at the beginning, if I was trying to learn grammar, I think I will not speak English because grammar can hold us back because it's such of a complicated thing. In each language, grammar is complicated. So, but when you don't have this barrier or this challenge at the beginning is good because you are free to speak. So after a while, when you are like you can't speak the language, you can't communicate with other people, and now you need to use English in a professional environment or to study at the university or in your job, then you need to be worried about grammar because you need to sound professional and you need to write things correctly. So this happened to me. Right now, I need to study grammar. I need to know grammar, and of course, there are a lot of tools that we can use to help us to achieve that goal. Especially, you can have classes of grammar. You can have platforms that help you to correct grammar sentences and everything. So I like what I said. It depends on the level you are and your goals. Because if you have a goal and you try to, if my goal is speak the language and I'm worried about grammar, I won't achieve that because grammar will hold me back. But if your goal is to go to the university to work in a English environment and you need to use the language in the right way, in a polite or in a formal situation, you should study grammar for sure. I like it. Thank you for the tip.
Now, if you are at the university level, or you want to get to the university level, this is a book that we were made to get when I took my writing classes in college. It's called Rules for Writers. This is the fourth edition. I got this maybe over 20 years ago.
Really?
20 years ago, that's the fourth edition. But the author is Diana Hacker.
Uh-huh.
It's got, I mean, a lot of great information. It's got a section in ESL. Um, so, I mean, that's a book that I use for my university, writing class. So it's a book that I've used and I've recommended, throughout the years while teaching English.
And grammar is such of a complicated subject because even you guys that are native, even you don't know every single rule that the linguist has. So even in Portuguese, for example, I don't know all the rules. I just use it and I know but I don't know why sometimes. I just use it. So I think it's the same with with English, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I had to learn all of the parts of speech. I had to learn, the differences between adverbs and adjectives and the different tenses when I started teaching 13 years ago. I didn't know. I mean, I knew what it was and I knew certain things, but I had to learn to teach because I studied, culinary arts. But while I was in college, I always loved writing and reading, but I just never took my education in that direction. I like cooking and like and creating art that you can eat.
Good, good. Joseph, we are coming to the end, and I want to ask you a few questions. It's kind of quick questions, and you need to answer with this first idea or word that pops in your head. Okay?
Okay.
Let's do that. Favorite book?
Favorite book. Oh, geez, I can't think of. Oh man, that is such a difficult question, and my mind is blank. I can't think of anything. Um, favorite book.
Maybe a book that you read when you were a kid or something.
Well, I think probably as a child, my favorite book and Disney movie was The Fox and the Hound.
Good.
Because well, I mean, there's two animals that are supposed to be enemies become best friends.
Ah, this is
And I
great.
guess yeah, because the hound is supposed to hunt the fox. You know,
Yeah.
and they in the movie or in the story the hunter feels bad for killing I guess the baby fox's mother, so he takes him home and the hound has I guess his own puppy also, and then the fox and the hound, the junior hound, become best friends, and they're supposed to be enemies, and I guess now that I think about it, being someone who is of mixed culture, it's like I'm kind of like it kind of represents something in my own history of two you know different cultures that are supposed to hate each other, but two people within those two different cultures meet and become best friends.
You can live together with different cultures and different languages and everything. Good. I like it. Okay, what do you prefer? An epic movie, an unforgettable series, or a documentary?
Can you repeat that?
What do you prefer? An epic movie, an unforgettable series, or a documentary, a good documentary?
I would say a good series
Good series. Do you have a favorite one?
because oh, I had so many. Probably one of my favorite series is maybe Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh,
Um,
good.
I mean, I like so many things about science fiction, about diverse futures. Uh, basically, like Ray Bradbury, the creator of Star Trek, had this idea in mind. Obviously, talking about political themes, social themes, um, ethical things happening in his time. And it's interesting how those same issues have been constant throughout history, and even in the evolutions of the Star Trek series, you still come across some of the same themes of social differences, cultural differences, racial differences, ethical things in medicine and research and development, whether it's having to do with the environment or having to do with changing somebody's look. I mean, that's what I like about that series is it touches on those topics. Also, the topic of artificial intelligence and what
Ah.
would it be like if someone were to create an android that was so similar to human beings, but doesn't have emotion, you know? And it's kind of like the Star Trek The Next Generation is like, I see it kind of like a futuristic Pinocchio story, but with so many other, themes involved. And it takes you through like this evolution of an android who has the knowledge of the universe almost, but his behaviors and mannerisms are like that of a child. But he's got all this knowledge in his head, right? And to see like his evolution from him being like a human child to more of an adult and becoming more human, even though biologically he's not human, is a really fascinating, journey to watch.
Wow. I can see you love Star Trek.
Well, I mean, I also like a lot of other things, like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, medieval type shows like The Witcher, or I also like Stargate Atlantis, Stargate. There's a lot of series that I like. One of my other favorites is called Eureka, and that one is set in modern times, and it's about like a science community, like all of the
What is the
people that live in
name?
the town. Eureka.
No, I never heard about it.
I'll send it to you in the chat.
Okay. And what this is a little bit hard to answer. Sometimes when I ask people get like, I don't know, but I'll ask you, what is your favorite word in English?
My favorite language more than English.
Your favorite word in English.
Oh, my favorite word in English. Um, I don't know. Rutabaga always seems to be a really funny word to me.
Yeah, it's quite hard. My favorite word is unstoppable because of the meaning of the word. I think it's really strong. I like it. So I didn't catch yours.
Rutabaga. It's a vegetable,
Ah, got it. Now I understand.
or maybe it's a root, and they use it to make like a fruit pie.
Ah, good, good. Uh, a word that should be avoid in English.
A word that should be avoided in English. I think the first word that comes to mind is victim.
What is?
Victim.
Ah, victim. Good, good.
And the
Well,
reason why is because, I mean, there are very few victims of certain behaviors, um, because, like, babies and children can be victims. But once you start to make your own decisions, you're responsible for um, whatever. Just like Einstein, like the theory of what is it? Whatever Well, whatever goes up must come down, right? There's always an action. There's always a reaction to every action, right? So the word victim to me, once you're in maybe an adolescent that starts making their own decisions, there are no more victims. I mean, there can be with certain exceptions, to that rule. But for the most part, whatever you put out to the universe, it'll either return to you or something better will come to you. You know?
That makes sense. That makes sense. And sometimes this happen with English students because they think, okay, I can't speak English because I don't have a good teacher, or because I was born in a poor country, or whatever. And they are like just complaining, I'm a victim of the circumstances and I can't speak English because blah, blah, blah. But you don't get the responsibility of I need to do that because I am the only responsible to of my success. So sometimes this could be a trap because we are just complaining and put the fault in another person or in the circumstances or whatever it is, and you are not getting the responsibility of your goals.
Right, right. And it's interesting too. In certain religions, people place their faith in God. But there's a saying in Spanish, el que no habla, Dios no lo oye. So in English, if you don't speak, God won't listen to you or God won't hear you. So you can put your faith in God, but if you do nothing to change the circumstances, if you don't act, God's not going to hear you.
Nothing's gonna
And God
happen.
won't do anything. God won't do anything
Exactly.
for you unless you help yourself. You
Exactly.
know?
Good. Good. That's a good one. So last question. If you could give only one tip, only one advice to an English learner that will help them to, unlock the confidence and start to speak English, what that tip or advice could be?
Well, the first tip I would say is if you're just learning English, uh, start with children's books that have dialogue. Uh, and that's really important because you start to familiarize yourself with how interactions happen in that language, depending on the context. Um, I mean, that's one tip, but I think there's a lot more involved with that. According to the Cambridge books that I used to teach out of, one of the first tips that they have is to keep a vocabulary journal, and write any like new words or phrases or expressions in that journal, translate them to your own language, you know. And then when you're reading the dialogue, you start to recognize those words and how they function in the conversation. And then once you start to advance, you can read, you can go to comic books. Then from there, you can go to like short stories or plays like Shakespeare. And then once you get more involved, you can read books
You
like
can
this
have
book
fun.
about
You can have fun while you are learning.
right,
Oh,
right. But I would say that reading is probably the most important thing you can do. But reading dialogues, um, and then just
sounds good.
practicing
This is a
with another
great
person.
this is a great tip. This is a great tip. Okay, Joseph. Thank you so much for being here. It was a great conversation. I I hope this conversation can help all the students to get more confident and start to really start to speak English without fear, without hesitation, because English is a beautiful language, and this language will help them to open more doors in their lives. So I'm so happy to receive you today, and thank you so much for your time. And I hope we can talk in another opportunity. And I want to give you last words here with our audience. So the word is with you.
Okay, well, thank you, Fred. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm welcome to hop on in anytime you ask.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And guys, thank you for watch. I hope you can will get tips and advice from our conversation today, and that this episode of the podcast can help you to improve your English too. Okay. See you the next episode. Bye bye.
All right, goodbye.